Hello again, folks. Steve here again with a little chat on something that came across my sense of conscience this morning. I watched a conversation between Stefan Molyneux and Mike Cernovich about fake news, and I've done a few presentations. Recently I actually did a presentation at a Toastmasters club not too long ago. I don't know how many people actually understood the import of what I was saying, but this whole thing of fake news, for those of you who are interested, has a great lot of meaning to it in terms of more than just the surface approach to it, right? In terms of within ourselves too, and ourselves to be more honest and so on. And I was actually reading this book too. It's by a guy named Thanissaro Bhikkhu, aka Jeffrey McGrath. That's his monk name. He's a Buddhist monk, and it's called Selves and Not Self. Pretty good stuff. The old Buddha, he was a pretty wise dude, and just, you know, I'll read a little bit about it as best I can, but take this in the context of what's going on. Bear in mind, this stuff is translated from stuff that was written, you know, thousands of years ago. So the more things change, the less the more things change, the more they stay the same. In other words, because there was obviously fake news back then too. Because it's interesting. He says, "And now is one made pure in 4 ways. By verbal action, there is the case where a certain person, abandoning false speech, abstains from false speech. When he has been called to a town meeting, a group meeting, a gathering of his relatives, a guild, or the royalty, if he is asked as a witness, 'Come and tell, good man, what you know.' If he doesn't know, he says, 'I don't know.' If he does know, he says, 'I know.' If he hasn't seen, he says, 'I haven't seen.' If he has seen, he says, 'I have seen.' Thus, he doesn't consciously tell a lie for his own sake, for the sake of others, or for the sake of any reward. Abandoning false speech, he abstains from false speech. He speaks the truth, holds to the truth, is firm, reliable, not a deceiver for the world. Abandoning divisive speech, he abstains from divisive speech." You see, and it goes on. The old way of writing was rather repetitive, for sure, and I noticed that in a lot of those old Eastern texts. Divisiveness is, I think, a lot of times the motive in what's going on because, well, for example, the media, right? The media has a very low record of reliability and honesty now, more so than ever probably, although it's always had its detractors for sure. But it has to uphold a narrative, right? It has to uphold a narrative of what is the normalcy of what they consider, or certain ruling classes consider to be appropriate. For example, if they were actually journalists, if people in the media were actually journalists, then they wouldn't look at classes of people. They would just observe actions and they'd try to get both sides of the story. For example, if a cop was to arrest somebody, well, they would go after the cop with the equal amount of zeal that they go after the guy he's arrested, right? It's just two guys, right? One guy arresting another guy. But they only look at the guy being arrested. They just assume the honorability of the other. So, you know, in a way, that's not in a way, that is actually fake journalism, right? Right off the bat, we know that. If you just take off our cloud of bias for a minute and just look at things objectively, as we're all just humans here, right? The same goes for if there was a judge who sentenced somebody, and the media goes and they're out there and they're parading around, they're making these big announcements and they're having press conferences and so on. You never see them digging into the history of the judge. What's he up to, right? It's just one dude dropping a gavel in to do with another dude, or another woman and to another woman, or whatever, right? That's all it is on the very basic surface. Everything else is just fabricated. It's this guy has a robe, this guy was accused of this, and this. It's all just fabrications. The truth of the matter is, there's usually a set of nut sacks sitting on one side and a set of nut sacks sitting on the other side, or the equivalent thereof. And that's, you know, but it begins to be fake news after that, because there's all these presumptions and fabrications that come up, right? If, on the other hand, we were to use reason and evidence instead of the sophistry, the group baiting, and the lies, then the whole fabricated structure that we call whatever, religions, governments, and everything, would begin to collapse. And it seems to be maybe our human nature to want to uphold that. So lies become, you know, evolutionarily important or societally important or whatever. But nevertheless, they are lies. So the house of cards that was built on lies, and also all those who profit from it, would begin to collapse. Now, I think we have to understand that, you know, fake news and lies of these types, though they're not productive in the net look up things, right? Because it's, you know, whenever there's fakery and lies, it's taking away from somebody. It's a cunning way of doing business. It's a backdoor deal way of doing business instead of a completely upfront and honest way of doing business. So it profits those who are the hucksters of it, but it takes away from those who are not. So it's not a net gain. It's probably not even an equal. It's probably a net loss. But it is nevertheless a gain for those who peddle in it. And it doesn't seem to matter that the result of all the fake news is a bunch of fodder of those who are injured by it. Right? A huge amount of loss that takes place as a result of it. But I think it's probably, you know, it's an evolutionary thing that we have all these gradients of evolution within us. Even in the brain itself, we have the amygdala all the way up to the neofrontal cortex. And all of that are evolutionary expansion packs on top of the other. So if we're running further down in this greedily seeking advantage of others, and basically killing parts of others, like stealing from and lying to and creating fakeries and fabrications, then we're profiting ourselves, as in the predatory animal that captures the prey and kills it and eats it. It profits, but the other doesn't, right? And perhaps more than the other doesn't, because if it's a mother or a family member or whatever, then others could die because of it. You know, babies could die because that one was eaten. So it's more than just an equal. One lives and one dies. It might be one lives and two dies, or several die. And this is the case with fake news, as I see it. It's a predatory nature of a lower expansion pack within our capability. It's actually a degrade of what we're capable of, I would say. So I think, like any of our foibles as human beings, because we all, I'm sure, if we're really honest, we've all been involved in fakery. And fake news is just a phenomenon that's coming to the fore because the primary hucksters of it, the big organizations that have been so-called news agencies, have been called out by a competitor called the not so organized and not so the more anarchistic forms of news that has sprung up on the media, on the internet, which is a counter narrative, right? So there's a threat. So that's been brought up. The fake news narrative has been brought out by the mainstream media to go after those, even though their process is all fakery. And but if we could somehow evolve to the point of, or get it, that it's probably will be much more beneficial for us to actually have genuine curiosity for truth as strong as the generous curiosity for fakery. My goodness, would we ever improve, I think. And in fact, I would say that the path to freedom, to real freedom, is this genuine curiosity for what is true. And even though we never plumb the depths of that, probably, it's a state of the result of our actions is this feeling of fulfillment, which to me is almost synonymous with freedom, and it's like a genuine comfort of happiness within, because we've done the right thing, to ally ourselves with truth, which can never involve, I don't think, this ongoing fake news and fabrication, which once again is just a predatory, it's a verbal predation of those, and it's set up to be divisive. It's funny how he talks about, back there, the Buddha's words, is this divisiveness that this fakery causes. And we see this in the media and politics today, which is this whole racism, this whole class baiting, this whole gender baiting with feminism and all these, and then they want to fracture even the each gender into all these just unbelievable number of made up fabrications as to what is gender and all that. It's all to divide, right? Because when you create chaos, you create worry, you create instability, and then there is the possibility to conquer. And conquer, once again, is a fabrication, because the truth of it all, we're all sovereign. But if we're told that we're not, that we have to be sovereign to somebody else, then we have lied. Because it's so, if we examine it carefully, we have the curiosity to look into the truth of it. At the end of the day, we're the ones who make the decisions in our mind, whether we're going to say yes or no, agree or not, on a very fundamental level. So I think that fake news is alive and well, and I think we can learn a lot from it, though, because it's a reflection of what's going on inside of ourselves, and that we have to deal with. That's where the node of freedom and the node of curiosity begins with, is within ourselves. And so the self-examination is very important, I think. And if you have a chance to read some of Tanisaro's work, I think he does a good job of explaining. It's not, I don't think it's for the faint of heart, for sure. He doesn't have a great, huge following, because it's quite a challenge. It's not a one-day seminar. This is a lifelong self-examination, a continual self-examination, to find out, what is really important. And it's a self-examination into the tendencies of the mind, the tendencies of the mind to create fabrications. And this is not a new phenomenon at all. It's just now, I think, more than ever in the history of humanity, the awakening has taken place that fake news abounds. And it's interesting how the ones who are talking about it the most are the biggest hucksters of it. Now, is there any surprise there? I don't think so. Steve here again, great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.